Okay, Salãmun Alaykum, everyone. Um, Happy Ramadan to all of you. Today we're going to start reading Surah 36 from verse 33 onwards. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Signs from God. Um, One sign for them is the dead land. We revive it and produce from it grains for their food. We grow in it gardens of date palms and grapes, and we cause springs to gush out therein. This is to provide them with fruits and to. Sorry, one sec. Forgot to put on my headphones. This is to provide them with fruits and to let them manufacture with their own hands whatever they need. Would they be thankful? Glory be to the one who created all kinds of plants from the earth, as well as themselves, and other creations that they do not even know. Another sign for them is the night. We remove the daylight therefrom, whereupon they are in darkness. The sun sets into a specific location according to the design of the Almighty. The moon we design to appear in stages until it becomes like an old curved sheet. The sun is never to catch up with the moon. The night and the day never deviate. Each of them is floating in its own orbit. So in these verses, God is explaining to us different, ways that we can remember Him and know the signs that God is controlling everything and His awesome power and yet God is able to do anything. So when it talks about the first one, reviving the dead land and producing from it grains for their food, and how awesome is that really? I mean, we just look at it and we just eat the food, but really when you think about all of this stuff, that actually helps you, remember God and grow your soul, I mean, for example, just eating food while you're not fasting, eating food can be a form of worship if it can help you grow your soul in the sense that you think about the food, you think about how God cracks the earth and allows all this food to be produced, and all the packaging and everything and the colors and the nutrients that God provides for us from the earth, and how this whole process, when you eat a piece of bread, think about what all things had to happen for you to be able to have this bread, what all plants and things had to be in place for us to be able to enjoy this. And when we think about it and how God does that, so that actually will help you grow your soul just while you're eating food, for example. And when it talks about gardens of date palms and grapes and springs, I mean, imagine how different life would be if these things were not there for us. I mean, date palms are not only beautiful, but God has created so many different species of plants that produce different types of dates, many different types of dates, and they're so nutritious. I mean, and so subhanallah. Uh, I mean, just think about the palm tree itself, for example. I mean, how it is so beautiful and it grows so tall. Um, and it's so sturdy and strong. It withstands like all kinds of weathers, all kinds of climates. I mean, mm, and then God talks about things that we manufacture with our own hands, whatever we want. So from all of these things, like imagine all the thousands of products that we manufacture. Sorry, I have to sneeze. I think I'm good. Okay. So I thought I was gonna sneeze, but I didn't. Okay. So, all these thousands of products that, we create from all of these like juices and jams and um, you know, all kinds of things that we see in the market that we eat, even processed food, which is not really good, uh, but still, it depends what you do with it, I suppose. And so it says, would they be thankful? So the idea behind this is uh, we have to be thankful to God for all of this. I think my video is okay. We have to be thankful for all of these things that God has put in place. We have to remember God, and we have to glorify Him for all the. And then it talks about all the different kinds of plants. I mean, there's I think there's like millions of species of plants, and there's still more that they're discovering. They still haven't been able to obviously, figure out all the different species of the different plants. They continue to discover more and more, you know. And I mean, there's plants here, there's plants in the ocean, so all of these and it says they're so beautiful, and it says they're all created all kinds of plants from the earth as well as themselves, and the creations that they do not even know. And so there's so many creations. I mean, there's so many creations that we know, but there's so many others that we do not even know, and God has created all of them. There's like, from the simplest life forms like bacteria and stuff to like, big animals and birds and sea creatures. I mean, there's all kinds of creatures that live in the most extreme climates. Like, there's things that survive inside of ice for ages and, in the ground. Like, so God created all these creatures for every different kind of habitat. And these are all signs that, God's able to do anything. And then finally, God talks about the sun and the moon, you know, which is incredible if you think about it. I mean, these are all giant heavenly bodies that, we could not even imagine moving at all with any technology. That we could not build anything, for example, that could make the earth move faster or spin faster, nothing. But God is the one who has, full control of all of this, and he's holding it. And the sun sets in a specific location according to the design of the Almighty. So sun sets in a specific point at a specific time on a specific day, and it does that every year without fail. you know so this is, God's amazing, immaculate design. Like, something so giant, he's able to control it to the second. I mean, it's amazing. Like every year, for example, it sets at the exact same time, by the second. It's accurate. And it's the same position for the earth. You can see the sun will be at that point based on the position of the earth. So that is, I mean, God's amazing design. And how the moon, appears in stages. I mean, the moon has a specific, speed at which it revolves around the earth, and it does that without fail, using the same rhythm. And that's what God has designed. And it never deviates from that. It's doing that for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, this is incredible. So these are all God's signs for us to know that, like, anything that precise could not just be, going on its own. I mean, all of these things that I mentioned, all of these systems, all of these plants and animals, and all of these are, divinely, constructed by God, like precisely, mathematically accurate. So, they just follow God's law, and they continue to do that. So obviously, if there was no God, uh, then all of these things will just have no law. They will just have no order, and nothing would happen like, that we would predict. Everything would just happen haphazardly, and there would just be chaos. There would be no life, nothing. But this is how we can commemorate God, and we can remember God by thinking about these creations. I mean, a lot of people will discover God just by looking around these signs, and Um, knowing that, obviously we have the natural instinct in us too, but, reflecting on these creations, really, if God wants us to remember Him, like we can really, uh, come close to God. And for us as submitters, we already know that, God is the omnipotent one. He's the only God. I mean, when we think about God in these ways and remind ourselves, this actually will help us grow our souls tremendously. So God will continue to read verse 41, invention of the first ship. Another sign for them is that we carried their ancestors on the loaded ark. Then we created the same for them to ride in. If we willed, we could have drowned them so that their screaming would not be heard, nor could they be saved. Instead, we shower them with mercy and let them enjoy for a while. Yet, when they're told, learn from your past to work righteousness for your future, um, that you may obtain mercy, no matter what kind of proof is given to them, they disregard. Uh, they consistently disregard it. When they're told, give from God's provisions to you, those who disbelieve say to those who believe, why should we give to those whom God could feed if He so willed? You're really far astray. They also challenge, when will that promise come to pass if you're truthful? All they see will be one blow that overwhelms them while they dispute. They will not even have time to make a will, nor will they be able to return to their people. The horn will be blown, whereupon they will rise from the grave and go to their Lord. They will say, woe to us! Who resurrected us from our death? This is what the Most Gracious has promised. The messengers were right. All it will take is one blow, whereupon they are summoned before us. On that day, no soul will be wronged in the least. You will be paid precisely for whatever you did. The dwellers of paradise will be on that day happily busy. They abide with their spouses in beautiful shade, enjoying comfortable furnishings. They will have fruits therein. They will have anything they wish. Greetings of peace from a most merciful Lord. As for you, O guilty ones, you will be set aside. The devil is the other alternative. Did I not covenant with you, O children of Adam, that you shall not worship the devil, that he is your most ardent enemy, and that you shall worship me alone? This is the right path. He has misled multitudes of you. Did you not possess any understanding? This is the hell that was this is the hell that was promised for you. Today you will burn in it, as a consequence of your disbelief. On that day we will seal their mouths, their hands and feet will bear witness to everything they had done. Okay, so I'll stop here, God willing, verse 65. Um, so we're told about the invention of the first ship, actually, in verse 41, and this is referring to Noah and his people. God carried them on the ark that was made of logs and ropes, and that was the first ship that was ever created. And then since then, mankind started creating all these ships, and this is God's mercy. This is God's blessing that we have these ships. We can travel to other continents and islands, and like get provisions from all of these places and whatnot. And um, I mean, it's a blessing that God has created water, with its peculiar properties that allows, things like giant ships to float on the surface, and all these things, God has allowed us to have so we can be thankful to Him. Uh, and, God is so merciful and so patient that, if He could have just punished us immediately, but, He gave us another chance to allow us to prove ourselves, and gave us this time. So and there's a lot of people, obviously, that God knows for a fact that need to be in hell, but God is allowing them to enjoy for right now and letting them incriminate themselves. And provide evidence against themselves further and further. Um, However, all these things that God has in place, all these systems, God has put in place. God also has the system in place where, if you do good deeds, you will be happy, and if you do things that are against God's system, obviously you will suffer in this life. You'll go through consequences. You will not be protected against Satan. Bad things will happen to you, and you'll have a miserable life. And yet, people will have people are blinded in this. People who are blinded in this world will never, take heed. And this is why, like when it says in verse 45, when they're told, "Learn from your past to work righteously in the future," no matter what kind of proof is given to them, they consistently disregard it. So there's people around us, for example, that we may present this evidence to them and they'll consistently disregard it. And there's so many people who have done that already. Of course, the proof was given to all these, people, all the leaders, all the scholars, when the Messiah of the Covenant was alive, as an example, and they were given so much evidence. Such heavy proof, concrete evidence, and verses after verses from the Quran proving everything in a very clear and precise, but they decided to disregard it. And the following verses, talk about 47 onwards, about human beings' stingy nature, and especially the disbelievers. They will not. Many of them will not give from God's provision. A lot of people will probably do it, but they'll do it for other reasons, like showing off to the people, or satisfying their ego of what people might think of them, which is again show off, anyways. Uh, and other reasons, political reasons or whatnot. So, but for these people, like there are people that will not give to that believe in God apparently, because they say, why should we give to those whom God could feed if he so willed? So they decide to not feed them because they use this as an excuse that if God wanted to feed them, he could have just fed them. So why should we feed them? But of course, these are um, tests in place for us to know. That we are, if we're going to be charitable, if we're going to be people who, have feelings for sympathy, and of course, if we believe in the hereafter, we will do it because we know that this benefits our soul and grows our soul tremendously. So it shows your belief in the hereafter, because if you don't believe in the hereafter, you will consider it as a financial loss. But if you believe in the hereafter, of course, this is like one of the best ways to invest your wealth, because you're going to get manifold reward in the real life. This worldly life is just an illusion. It's just like playing Monopoly. You have the Monopoly money in this life, and as soon as the game is over, that's it. Like you you go back to your real life. You might be a millionaire in Monopoly, but then once it's done, you might be broke. Or you might have a lot of money depending on what you did with your Monopoly money, right? So but we have to bear that in mind. And obviously, verse 48 shows that they don't really believe in the hereafter because they are doubtful about it. They're like uh, and but God describes the events in the day of judgment. These are events that have already taken place as far as God is concerned. So I mean, these are kind of some of them are. When you look at what happens to the disbelievers, it's sad for them. It's a sorry condition for them, but they chose this destiny for themselves. And for the believers, it's so beautiful. It says they will be on that day. Uh, happily busy, so we will be happy, and it's an active life, the utopian active life, right? So we'll be doing things, we'll be going to events, whatever it is, it's like, it's not like we're just like sleeping and dreaming, we will be, just having fun and enjoying our lives, and who in the world doesn't want to have that kind of reward? I mean, obviously people want them in this world, because most people, because they don't believe in the hereafter, but this life, as we know, as compared to the hereafter, is now. So for eternity, who would not want to be happy forever? That they will not get bored. They will have spouses in beautiful shade, enjoying comfortable furnishings. Think about the most comfortable furnishings you can imagine. I mean, here in this world, we know we pay so much for those, but those are nothing as compared to the furnishings that God is talking about in the hereafter, and beautiful surroundings, and uh, fruits and anything you wish. Imagine, anything you wish. I mean, this is like, we see that in the movies, like somebody has a genie and you get three wishes and you're doomed. But at the day of, I mean, in the hereafter, I mean, you don't have any limits on your wishes, and you can enjoy anything you desire. And I mean, all these things we can imagine. God says, I mean, the hereafter is even more beautiful for the believers than what we can imagine. So um, this is beautiful, and greetings of peace from a most merciful Lord. And imagine, being in a position where God is sending you greetings, and you're able to be with Him and see the angels and all the righteous people around you, and nothing bad around you, no nonsense, and just bliss. I mean, this is a great triumph, as God says, right? This is victory. But the other alternative is Satan, you know. So either you worship God. If you don't worship God, you're worshiping Satan in this life. I mean, you might not know you don't have to worship an entity with two head with two horns. I mean, in order for you to be a Satan worshiper, but worshiping your ego, worshiping money, worshiping your job, worshiping another god like Jesus or Muhammad or anyone, other than God alone, or even worshiping your children. Anything worshiping other than God is worshiping Satan, because you're following Satan's wishes, you're following Satan's orders, and that's why it says the devil's the other alternative. And it says he has, as it says, he has misled multitudes of people. And God says, "Did I not warn you about this? Did I not covenant with you that we should worship?" I mean, we all bore witness. We all made a covenant with God before when we came to this world, that we will worship God alone, and we will not worship Satan, and we will not follow him. And yet we see, millions and millions of people, falling for Satan's traps so easily. Even people who say they believe in God and worship God, and even people who say they worship God alone, unfortunately, fall for this, because they do not know God, um, and other things. So um, on that day, it says, uh, verse 65, that we will seal their mouths, their hands and feet will bear witness to everything they had done. So we'll all have a videotape of everything that we did. It will be played back for us. I mean, we would be able to play it back for ourselves to see what we did. So there's no denying of anything, because the proof is right there against us. Like, if we didn't live our lives the way we were supposed to, I mean, we will be doomed. So God will continue reading verse 66. If we will, we can freeze them in place. Thus they can neither move forward nor go back. Sorry, if we will, we can veil their eyes, and consequently, when they seek the path, they will not see. If we will, we can freeze them in place. Thus they can neither move forward nor go back. Whomever we permit to live for a long time, we revert him to weakness. Do they not understand? What we taught the messenger was not poetry, nor is he a poet. This is but a formidable proof and a profound Quran, to preach to those who are alive and to expose the disbelievers. Have they not seen that we created for them with our own hands livestock that they own, and we subdued them for them. Some they ride and some they eat. They derive other benefits from them as well as drinks. Would they not be appreciative? So, subhanAllah, I mean, um, on the day of judgment, uh, you know, we will pay for everything. And then after that, God is telling us that He controls, uh, I mean, everything, to, the smallest degree, and if we will, God says, if God wills, He can freeze us in our place. He can veil our eyes so we can't see. We won't be able to move. We would just freeze, simply. We cannot do anything. But God allows us so that we will not commit any crimes, we will not do any sins, you know. But God allows us to live for a predetermined period of time, do what we want. We have the complete freedom of choice to do what we want, and then eventually, God says we revert Him to weakness. So when we get old, and also this is kind of like sign, like, hey, like this is not gonna last forever, like it's like, it's like you have a phone that's gonna die, and the battery keeps getting lower and lower, eventually, and there's no way, there's no charger that has been invented for this battery. So eventually it's gonna run out, so that's pretty much like what our lifespan is like, and we can see that, you know but people fail to understand that this is an irreversible process, and what is waiting for people at the end of the day is something that they're not even aware of. I mean, and God talks about this Quran, that this is not poetry. This is not just words of a soothsayer. This is a profound scripture with a profound proof. It's a profound Quran. And actually, the footnote for this says the word zikr refers to the Quran's great mathematical code, which is certainly not literary nor poetry. Please check 38 1, 18, 15, 6, 9, 16, 44, 21, 2, and 24, 26, 5, and 36, 11. So all of these verses, talks about the Quran's mathematical proof. So, God is letting us know this is not just poetry. I mean, Quran is, an awesome has an awesome mathematical miracle that, really solidifies, the proof of his divine authorship, that, this Quran is not written by some poet. There's like strong, extremely heavy mathematical evidence behind each word and each letter that is in place. It's placed precisely by a mathematical divine, plan that keeps it in a perfect balance, just like God's other creation that He has created. I mean, everything is precisely measured in the Quran too. I mean, every word, every letter is put in place where it's supposed to be. I mean, all the letters are divinely calculated, and it's an awesome mathematical miracle that is behind this. And obviously, Muhammad did not have a clue about the Quran's mathematical code. I mean, we can't, without using a computer, can't even, count all the words correctly without making mistakes. Like, if you have to count the word God, for example, even, you'll make a lot of mistakes. But, this, we're talking about each and every single letter, we're able to have, everything is in place, by a precise mathematical structure, which is impossible to imitate. So, uh, then God talks about, so it says to preach to those who are alive and to expose the disbelievers. So it helps people who are alive, who are seers, to save themselves, and then also to expose people who are disbelievers, because when you present it to a disbeliever, I mean, someone might be believing in God and say, for example, even saying, I believe in God alone, I'm a Muslim, I believe in the Quran, all that. And when you present to them the truth from the Quran, then they become disbelievers. So their disbelief is exposed, you know. People who offer lip service, you know, this book exposes all of that. It's incredible. And then we're told about all the livestock that God has created. I mean, imagine like if we didn't have livestock, you know, what would happen? I mean, you will not be able to eat steak, you know, for example. You will not be able to make, um, you know, you'll not be able to have any dairy, you know, you will not have any dairy products, you know, the whole, I mean, imagine, yeah, I mean, especially, and you, only thing you can get is all those, um, you know, vegan alternatives, but you can't even get those because they wouldn't even know what to make, you know. So they, I mean, it's because they wouldn't have something to mimic. But still, I mean, those vegan things taste terrible in my opinion. But anyways, um, it's really a blessing from God that you know He has created all this livestock for us to enjoy. I mean, it's so nutritious. I mean, you could be exhausted and you know out of energy, and you know drinking a glass of milk, for example, you know, it's so satisfying. And but just think about how you know God creates this. You know, I mean, through um, you know the process through which you know we get milk, and it's so white that you know it's like the standard of what white is. You know, we compare that to milk, but you know, yet it's filtered out from the blood and you know all the waste. So I mean, this is another sign from God, and all of these animals. I mean, how God subdues them for us too. You know, I mean, like imagine if you know God had given us the cow, right? The cow is subdued for us. Like you know, you can put it somewhere, let it drink. You can slaughter it whenever you want. You know, imagine if the cow was something like I don't know, like a crocodile or an eagle that could fly or you know bite people and stuff like that. You know, I mean, it would be very difficult for us to get these provisions from them that we get now on such a massive scale, right? But God has allowed them to be conditioned in a way that they just do what we want them to do, you know? They just like sheep, you know? I mean, why do they why do people like talk about sheep? Because you know they're just they don't it's almost like they don't have brains, which they do by the way, but you know they're just very like they don't use their mind. They would just do what you tell them to do, and they just see all the other sheep and they're following them. um, and and all of these creatures, you know, we're able to subdue them for us. I mean, horses that we ride. I mean, other livestock, mules that people ride, you know, in treacherous terrain. I mean, obviously that you really get to appreciate when you go to real high altitudes where you know no vehicles or people could climb, but you know these creatures will just go without thinking, you know. Excuse me. So all these are God's proofs, and you know we are told that we have. I mean, would they not be appreciative? So we have to remember God, and we have to be appreciative. That's the whole point. And how would we be appreciative? I mean, we worship Him, we obey Him. You know, we follow God's laws, and you know work towards our hereafter, and not commit idol worship. Powerless idols. Verse 74. They set up beside God other gods, perhaps uh, they can be of help to them. On the contrary, they cannot help them. They end up serving them as devoted soldiers. Therefore, do not be saddened by their utterances. We are fully aware of everything they conceal and everything they declare. Does a human being not see that we created him from a tiny drop, and then he turns into an ardent enemy? He raises a question to us while forgetting his initial creation. Who can resurrect the bones after they had rotted? Say, the one who initiated them in the first place will resurrect them. He's fully aware of every creation. He's the one who creates for you from the green trees fuel which you burn for light. Is not the one who created the heavens and the earth able to recreate the same? Indeed, yes, indeed. He is the creator, the omniscient. All he needs to do to carry out any command is to say to it, be, and it is. Therefore, glory be to the one in whose hand is the sovereignty over all things, and to him you will be returned. And the footnote for this verse says, it is noteworthy that the geometrical value of Rashad 505 plus the geometrical value of Khalifa 725 plus the surah number 36 plus the number of verses 83 produces a total that is a multiple of 19, or 19 times 71. Also, 36 is among the 29 initial surahs, is the number 19 among the 29 initial surahs. Um, so, verse 74, I mean, we're being told about the powerless idols that people set up beside God. I mean, everyone besides God is powerless. They have no power. All power belongs to God. If you give power to anyone or anything besides God, you're simply committing idol worship. And if maintained till death, is, unforgivable offense. So, but, when people worship these idols, I mean, based on the Quran, when people worship these idols, they the idols cannot help them, right? But they just end up serving them as devoted soldiers. I mean, they dedicate their lives to worshiping these idols. I mean, we see that. Well, people, for example, worshiping Jesus or Muhammad, like they dedicate their lives for their idol. I mean, they praise their idol day and night, and they do all kinds of things and strive and everything, for their idol. And then what happens eventually? I mean, all of this is nullified, but they don't get anything out of it. But it's like almost they're enslaved by their own sins, and they live this life of, slavery where they hurt themselves and they hurt their children, and you know, just live a miserable life. And I mean, so this is definitely clearly not an intelligent choice. So God says, do not be saddened by their utterances. We shouldn't be saddened by their utterances because they're only hurting their own souls. I mean, we have no reason to be sad. And God creates us from a tiny drop. And, you know, so imagine like this is really who we are. We forget where we come from. And then we start to question God and his system, that his omnipotence. I mean, we were nothing, so who created us? God. And here we are questioning how God can resurrect us. And this is the biggest barrier for most people, towards salvation, where they fail to pass this simple test. That God is the one who created us from nothing to now. I mean, why do people think that he's not going to do that? He's not going to bring us back. It's and the so that's what it says. The one who initiated them in the first place will resurrect them. He's fully aware of every creation. I mean, it's not like God forgot that who was there like 1,000 years ago, and he's going to forget to resurrect him. I mean, he knows this person by name, what he did, how many kids, everything. He's going to bring him back, every person, every creature, because everything is in his record. I mean, he's the one who built them, right? It's like you write a software program. I mean, you know exactly how many variables you wrote, of course. I mean, so, I mean, I don't want to talk computer science here, but just an idea, like he built this whole system, so he has the master plan. He knows what he built, so he's going to build it again. It's pretty simple. And also, we're being told about the trees from which we get fuel, which we which you burn for light. I mean, green trees that provide fuel, which you light. I mean, all these trees that um, are in existence, and that provide fuel in itself. And then you have other trees that you get all these minerals and oil. I mean, oils and stuff from that are actually in the ground. They get decomposed for thousands of years, and then they get decomposed into like oil and gas and all of this stuff. This is all God's blessing, and God has created them. So I mean, so all of this just to show us that, I mean, of God's awesome power. And, when he has this awesome power, I mean, what stops us from believing that he doesn't have the ability and the power to bring us back? And this is the whole point of this, to allow us to think about God, to commemorate him and to worship him, appreciate him by worshiping him, of course, uh, and work towards our salvation. Because for God, everything is easy. He can do anything. I mean, all this thing that God has created, God says in the Quran that he, not even a moment of slumber or tiredness, overtakes God at any moment in time, and he's fully aware. And he just says to it be, and it is. It's so simple, for God to do anything, so easy. So for God to resurrect us is no big deal. All he's gonna do is, say be, and we will be resurrected on the day of judgment. So so we have to glorify God. I mean, he's the true king. I mean, like, I mean, someone will have great respect for a president of a country, but or like a ruler, a king of, many of an empire. But think about God. He is sovereign over all creation. It's the seven universes. And so we have to glorify God, in order for us to be redeemed, so we can we can be one of those people who enjoy the bliss and comfort, and joy and happiness for eternity that God has promised us in the Quran. So that I'd like to end, and if you guys have any questions and comments, feel free.
Masha Allah, great study, Salman. Thank you. God
Oh, thank you,
bless.
Marcella. God
Much
bless you too.
great study.
Thank you.
MashaAllah. Very good job. Praise God.
Thank you. Okay, anybody has any comments, questions?
Yeah, inshallah. Mashallah. Right, starting from the verse 33, where it says signs of God. God is presenting a list of his signs which we, you know, see every day, on a daily basis, not hidden somewhere, or you know that we recognize that is a master, planner, designer behind everything, that no human being can do a creation like that. Just to, those who do not believe in God, if they just reflect on these things, any of these signs should be enough to understand that, there is these miraculous, or, like who's controlling, who's doing the sunsets into a specific location according to the design of the Almighty, the Omniscient. And the night we remove the daylight therefrom, whereupon they are in darkness. Um, so the plants and the, reviving the dead land, the manufacture. I mean, anything you see in this life, we see that, okay, the iPhone or Apple computer is designed by Steve Jobs, unique design, and then there are windows for. There is a designer behind it, a manufacturer behind it, and they are, of course, billionaires today because of their designs and what they invented. And here we have God signs, and we think there is no designer behind it, behind these awesome creations and design. So there's a list goes on and on. This is few of his things, right? And we see his signs and marvels every day pass by. For that's why God says those who possess intelligence will take heed and think about it and reflect that this is not created in vain. There is a purpose behind everything. That's it for now. Inshallah.
Mashallah. So also I wanted to mention another thing that I forgot to point out was that we see in the beginning of the surah also, and the first three verses, it says, "YS and the Quran that is full of wisdom, most assuredly you, Rashad, are one of the messengers." These are the first three verses, and then also the last verse where I read the footnote. Uh, it says where Surah 36 is the 19th initial surah, the geometrical value of Rashad plus Khalif plus the sum of the surah and the verse numbers add up to be a multiple of 19. So it's important to point out that this surah is referring to God's messenger of the covenant, and he was informed through Gabriel that this surah was specifically about him, and that's not to magnify his importance or anything like that, but it's, as a messenger of God, I mean, it plays an important role, with in accordance with the Quran's mathematical code. A lot of people are going to accept this message, as the time goes on, and soon, submission will dominate the whole world. Um, so I just wanted to point that out, that the this mathematical significance of Surah 36, and this is why, like, we see people who don't even know about the messenger or don't even believe in the messenger. I mean, they they put like such great emphasis on Surah 36 of the Quran, as part of God's divine plan, without even knowing what this is about. I believe
MashaAllah,
there's
very good point. I know this surah, this surah people, and but it makes a lot of people angry too if you even
so
mention that this is this is about Rashad, and because they call it, they glorify actually Prophet Muhammad through this surah,
mhm, yeah.
and call it the heart of Quran. Um, commemorate, I mean, recite this surah in praiseful way. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, mashallah. True. The surah is read in for in blessings. They will do like a khatam, like they'll gather people and yasin, and they'll read it, like for blessings and stuff, and not realizing, like you mentioned, that this is the 19th surah in the initial sequence. So very much, if you actually read the translation, it actually applies. It's like somebody would say this is, it's like written on ourselves in the past. Though it's a story of God is talking about different, but everything basically applies on our life. Mashallah. Thank you.
The initials are the part of the proof, right? And
Mhm.
these are the proofs. If any um, initial surah which starts with the any surah which starts with initial, you will it talks about the Quran, and these are the proof or something like that. You will see, and it's it's really amazing. It this I know it's far fetched, but I was watching a documentary on some Christian cult leader. They, of course, if anybody's not practicing, which is the majority is doing, sometimes they make them cult leaders. So was he. This guy recently showed that documentary on what happened to this guy. It's weirdly they ambushed his compound in U.S. on it was April 19, and they killed women and children there. There were like 76 people. And this person was something focusing on seven seals in the book of Revelations in Bible. And he had certain understanding. And basically what he was saying is that his understanding was that there is end of the time is related to this, and a Messiah is gonna come. Um, hello, Salman?
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
here.
we can hear you.
Oh, sorry, his picture froze, and I thought like I lost the connection.
Okay.
And obviously,
He-
this person anyway died under the age of 40, with many people in that um, compound were under the age of 40, and April 19 was significant. But then I realized there was a slight connection. Probably he didn't come to the whole thing, but the seven pairs of the Quran, right? And the end of the time is mentioned by the messenger of the covenant, and messenger of the covenant has is mentioned in the Bible, that after, as in the Quran as well, that after all the prophets and the scriptures have been delivered, a messenger will come, and the end of the time was. It was interesting because this guy kept screaming, "I will come out." The all that army of people, tanks were outside this compound, and they kept telling him he has to come out, and he said, "Let me finish my theory, and then I will come out." He just kept saying, and he was harmless, and all that. He just, but God had a different plan. Of course, God is running everything. So he could not deliver his manifest, and then they said, "No, we are running out of patience." It's on Netflix available now. It's called Waco. It happened in Waco, Texas, and weirdly, 2 years later, somebody was very upset about how FBI dealt with this incident. And April 19 again, this person took a step, and in Oklahoma City, mass destruction happened. Anyways, even this guy, when they um, gave him death sentence, the other guy, um, he was under the age of 40. He also, that incident happened on April 19 as well. So the there are fragments fragments of the truth. Obviously, the when God sent previous scriptures must contain so much information, but God knew that people will deviate and change, and it happened. But Subhanallah, and the final scripture contains information that will stay with us for the rest of this the is this earthly the lifespan of this earth, inshallah, for the end of humanity, till the end of human race survives. And this is a complete message, and how God has protected is through the mathematical code, and these initial play a huge part in the preservation of the Quran. And definitely this surah is about the messenger of the covenant, mashallah.
Mashallah. Actually, it'll be interesting to watch that documentary because we, in our time, we lived through that whatever happened in Waco, Texas, and
Right, me too. I was alive watching it.
yeah, and also the other one was Oklahoma bombing. Was that it?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Connected to
okay, okay.
the
Yeah.
Oklahoma bombing happened. This guy was, it was the second anniversary of that Waco incident.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened to be April 19 too.
Oh,
And
okay.
the weird thing is that this guy's name was some English name. Then he changed it to David Koresh.
Uh-huh.
Um, like
Uh-huh.
something,
I remember that name. Yes.
yeah, the Koresh party, they called this, this group was called um, the Davidian something, like something derived from David.
Mm-hmm.
And very interesting. They're fragments of, like he was on to something, but of course, God, God's plan. But you know, this guy would not drink or eat pork.
Mashallah.
Yeah, it's like there were so many signs about. Even at that time, I felt like there was something very sinister that they killed those innocent children. 25 kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Many came out, and because there was a negotiating person, and yeah, but there were some other things he wasn't doing right according to the scripture. But who knows what's the true story anymore? That because they died.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wanted to know, like, this is from a survivor's book. He's the one who survived and wrote the book and gave details. But again, it's from his perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, subhanallah, these initials are so awesome. Just when we study in the appendices the role of each initial and how they're interconnected, and the count comes to always the multiple of 19, it's just the huge part of um, the mathematical code. Subhanallah.
I'm actually a part of like a group called Atheist, Deist, and people of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And as Sulman was reading, the questions that's being asked, those are the questions they'd ask. Like they cannot believe that they'll get when you die you're gonna get resurrected and all these things. And as he was reading, I remember that group so much. The silly questions they ask. And so these questions people do ask. It's not just like, people ask it on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's the that's the deal breaker, right? At least they're honest and they say they don't believe in it. Then there are those who say, oh, they believe in it, but they really don't. You
Yeah.
know, the hypocrites, they just, oh yeah, end of the world hereafter. But if they really did believe, they would not commit, transgressions and horrendous crimes. But they do. Like all the Muslims, so-called Muslims, traditional, supposed to believe in the hereafter. That's one of the main criteria of the minimum criteria of the faith. And they all say we do, but their actions tell a different story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I wanted to actually this is pretty significant amount of evidence. So if you guys go through Appendix 2, I have on page 411, but it's where says in Arabic, surely you're one of the messengers. Um, uh, so on that page, you see a lot of mathematical proofs relating to this, So God will now read it. It says, surely you are one of the messengers, 36:3, it's from the surah that we read. So then the messenger of the covenant wrote in Appendix 2, it says, I was told most assertively through the angel Gabriel that verse 3 of Surah 36 refers specifically to me. If we arrange the initial surahs only, starting from Surah 2, then 3, then Surah 7, and so on, we see that Surah 36, Yasin, occupies position number 19. Then it says, verse 3 of Surah 36 says, surely you are the messengers. The geometrical value of this phrase is 612. By adding this value, 612, plus the surah number 36, plus the verse number 3, plus the geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa, we get the multiple of 19, 1881, or 19 times 99. And Surah 36 consists of 83. If we add the surah number plus the number of verses, 83, plus the geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa, we get, again, a multiple of 19, 1349, or 19 times 71. Then it says from 381, Surah 3, verse 81, where it says about the messenger of the covenant. It says from 31, where the messenger of the covenant is prophesied, to Surah 36, there are 3,330 verses. By adding the value of Rashad Khalifa to this number of verses, we get a multiple of 19, 19 times 240. Then it says from 381 to 36.3, there are 3,333 verses. By adding this number to geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa, we get another multiple of 19, 19 times 202. And it says the number of verses from the beginning of the Quran to 36.3 is 3,705, which is also 19, 19 times
Wow, subhanallah.
195. It says the sum of the verse numbers of every surah from the beginning of the Quran to 36.3 is 257,925. That's also a multiple of 19. 19 times 13,575. And then there's a few, actually. I mean, you can read them actually in this, but I mean, I can just read them. There's only 3 more. It says some of the surah numbers, and there's a table for it also, table 8. I think that's for the following one. Anyways, this is the sum of the surah numbers from Surah 1 to Surah 36 is 6,666. Sum of the surah numbers from Surah 1 to 36, just the surah numbers. If you add them from Surah 1 to 36, like 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and so on up to 36 is 666. If we add this number to the geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa, plus geometrical value of verse 33, which is surely you messengers, which is actually 612, the total is a multiple of 19. Then number 29 says, if we add the sum of the verse numbers from the first occurrence of the root word Rashada, which is 2186, to 36.3, it says surely one of the measures, to the total number of surahs, which is 35, plus the surah numbers themselves, at a total that is a multiple of 19. Then the last one says, the sum of the surah numbers from the first occurrence of the root word Rashada to 36.3 is 665, which is also a multiple of 19. Yeah, note that these are 35 surahs. That's the thing, because it's a multiple of 19 times 5. Yeah, so there's 35 surahs between the first surah where the root word Rashada occurs to this verse. If you see it in writing, it's hard for you to follow as I'm speaking. If you read it instead of appendix to yourself, you can look at these facts, these proofs. I think it's pretty amazing. SubhanAllah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, Masha Allah. There's irrefutable amount of evidence is about the deeper you fall into this mathematical system, the more it gets amazing. It starts off with the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim with the 19 letters, and as you go further and further, and your eyes start popping, your jaw start dropping, and You just cannot ignore the fact that this is amazingly one of the greatest miracle. Everything starts falling in the right spot. Uh, what are the odds of like a long time ago when we didn't have printers, people like right now you just copy, you just make one plate and you can make as many and it will not make any error. You just have to proofread it and that's it, and then you can just keep printing as much as you want and it will not make a mistake. But in old times, if you have to copy the Quran or any book, people have to actually sit down with the pen and write it. There's no printers. So it's easy to make a mistake. Like when you have to send Quran to other communities, you have to actually sit down and write the whole Quran with the ink. And it's easy to make a mistake. You can easily miss out one letter, like Alif Lam Mim. If you miss one L, in the surah number 2, which is the longest surah, and then you send it, now there's a mathematical error happen. And one can appreciate the fact that those times how God protected each letter. I mean, each letter of the Quran word is complex with this number 19 miracle. Like not even a single letter was missed with all the printing in the old time. This in itself, mashallah, is a blessing that Quran was protected by God.
Mhm.
Mashallah. Regarding verse 68, I seek refuge in God from Satan rejected. It says, whoever we permit to live for a long time, we revert him to weakness. Do they not understand? When we're talking about weakness, we're talking about when we get old and um you know hurtful bones and the general thing that goes with weakness. We're not talking about diseased weakness.
No,
Yeah.
it's the natural
All right,
process
aging.
God is
Yeah,
describing here,
aging.
mashallah.
Yes.
Even like
So at this
sorry.
sorry, Sister Nadra, you can
No,
go
no,
ahead.
no, no. Please, please, please finish your comment.
So at this point, it's not that you know in that 75, 80, we shouldn't be having diabetes and Alzheimer and things like that. It
Mhm.
should just be a general weakness, like like when you're a child, you're healthy, but you're weak, as in your parents still carrying you around and doing things for you.
Mhm.
So we're not talking about a person getting, like Alzheimer and things like that. And the typical disease right now, which people think everybody will have it at some point, would be like diabetes based on our diet. So we're not talking about that. We're just talking about just cranky bones and achy bones and things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even like Abraham's wife was saying, my brittle bones, or was it Abraham saying, or his wife was saying,
No, not his wife.
besides my brittle bones?
Or
And we
Zachariah.
know
The wife, not the wife.
who was saying.
Uh, it wasn't saying brittle. Yeah, brittle. Yeah, that was the guy saying.
I think that was Zachariah, isn't it?
That was
Oh,
Zechariah.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. That's right. Right.
The
So the
bones that turn
bones,
blue in your
do
body.
become brittle and fragile with
Yeah,
time. Their density is affected.
yeah,
That's a natural process, right?
yeah.
Just like yeah. So the white,
So,
when your hair
yeah.
go gray, they cannot become black again. So
I'm
uh,
already in that category.
oh yeah, of course we are. We are. Uh, me
Like
too. Long
color
time ago.
them.
But yeah, so old age, there are like serious diseases attached to old age, and then there's just the old age process, which that your end is coming near. The machinery, like Solomon was describing, there is no battery that you can change, and then you'll be running strong again once that battery is done and it's done. So the wear tear, you won't be like a marathon running person. But the thing is, the basic idea of perfect health is that a perfect believer will get a perfect health. When we have imperfection in our belief, there would be imperfection in our health too. That's a simple, you know. But God forgives a lot of our sins. But if, the idol worship maintain until that, then there's serious consequences. This is how I see. If somebody has spent all their life apparently really good believer, we see them as good believer, and then at the end, um, the cancer comes suddenly. Why would that happen to a good believer? That is the question, right? So something went definitely very wrong. There's some major test they failed or something, because we are tested, right? We're tested in this life about our in different situations. God has described those situations, and if we flunk a major test of submission related to submission, not our mere weaknesses, like as a person, um, then there would be serious consequences, because maybe the not much time of lifespan is left, and this person, um, his or her true convictions were exposed at the end. And because if they die with like that kind of a suffering, yeah.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, the reason why they find it so hard to believe that is because it's such a common thing. Like, for example, many people are dying of cancer. Like, I mean, we grew up like watching all these people around us die of all of these diseases, right? But of course, they're not believers. And so then when we become submitters and we read about this, it's hard for a lot of people to believe that, these people could die peaceful, live a peaceful life where they don't have to suffer through pain and misery towards the end of their life, and they could have a life where in the last couple of years of their life are the best years of their life. So this is very hard for people to believe. But with God, we read in these verses that everything is possible. When God promises anything, promises us in the Quran, and the messenger explains it in great detail, then we better believe it, for our own good, and we should not have a slightest doubt, in ourselves that the believers will have perfect happiness. I mean, having perfect health means that you're not going to have any health problems, you're not going to have any problems, serious problems, or any kind of problems, not even a headache, where it takes away from your happiness. I mean, if you can have a bad headache and just be very happy, it just doesn't work. That uh, headache is going to keep bothering you, and you're not going to feel better until the headache's taken away, for example. And I mean, of course, a headache is a small thing. I mean, we can get it, just a pinch if we do something wrong, just to get our attention. But when we talk about retribution, where it ends up in taking our life at the end, also, you're talking about a disease like cancer, where you go through a miserable, most painful last couple of months or years. I mean, that's not from God, because in God's kingdom, you're not gonna suffer from any of these things, and the Messenger of the Covenant talks about this as a means of retribution for people, who have transgressed God's laws. I mean, in the past, where, the entire community is annihilated, now in this time and era, it's not gonna happen that way. So, God allowed the creation of viruses and cancer and all these AIDS and all, I mean, AIDS being a virus too, and all these other diseases, to selectively annihilate people, and punish them, based on the crimes that they committed. So for a lot of people, at least submission I mean, it's hard for them to believe that, such and such person, got this, for example, So somebody could idolize a person in submission, and I use the word submission specifically because this is relevant to submitters, is, they might idolize a person as a saint or a holy person or very close to God who knows much about submission, and to them this person is a definition of perfection, and then they see this person going through this, and then they they find themselves in a state of disbelief because, well, this person, they say, well, this person was so perfect, and that, he or she was so perfect and dedicated their lives to serving God according to their, and how could I, like, for example, yeah, I was going to give another example, but I think that's not appropriate. So, um, I mean, but I'll just give that example anyways, because I don't think it's inappropriate actually. So let's say, like for example, you can think of it as the Christians. For the Christians, let's say they have the Pope, right? And tomorrow they find out that the Pope has cancer, right? And so then you go and tell them that, cancer is a form of retribution. If you're gonna have a painful, lingering death, and then you're gonna die, and then that's a retribution from God. So those people who worship the Pope and idolize him and really have great reverence for him and deep respect for him, they're never going to believe you. Even if the Pope has AIDS, they're not going to believe that, right? That the Pope, that it's bad. They're going to say, oh, it's a blessing, he's so close to God, blah, blah. And that's what happens in submission. We see people, put these people on such a high pedestal, and then they don't know, obviously, according in their perspective, they might have been like the definition of perfection, but for believers, I mean, they will know, or God will make it known to them if it's relevant to them, that why such thing will happen. I mean, they should be able to recognize, because if you're a believer and somebody has gotten to this point and has broken serious laws of God that have deserved such a miserable life. We're not talking about death, we're talking about life. Have deserved such a miserable life, they're going through this towards the end of their lifetime. Which and inevitable result of death. Let like why also, and if you look deep into these people's lives, for me personally, I believe that, of course, without a doubt, that what the messenger has explained about perfect health, perfect wealth, perfect happiness is 100% true. So if you live a life like that, and what I mean by that is a private life and your public life, both being clean, and you not you and you haven't done something serious like fabricated lies about God or promoted innovations and things like that, then yeah, you're gonna have a perfect life. But what if you are this person who's very knowledgeable and very righteous in front of people and is soft spoken and stuff like that, and then they go around promoting their personal ideas and spreading innovations, I mean, what would and promoting them and following them, I mean, what can you expect from first and then for such a person, of course, for you to be so close to God at that point, so close to the truth. I mean, if you just come to submission, you're so close to the truth, you're so close to the message, and a lot is expected of you. Like when God talks about when the children of Israel, they did not even see 1/10 of the miracle we have given to this generation. How terrible was my retribution, right? When they disregarded the revelation. So it's that bad, of course. So of course we can expect these things to happen when people disregard revelations, when they promote innovations, fabricate lies about God, and as if it's not a big deal, right? So and those are the types of people that we will see that will be annihilated through these types of diseases, and it's a sign from us, from God, that something seriously wrong. I think for people it have been a lesson, or should be a lesson, when they see things like that, rather than the opposite, instead of seeing it as a lesson, and think that, well, we shouldn't be following this person's footsteps, or his or her footsteps. They will actually get further in their disbelief, some of them, to think that, well, this is a blessing and this and that, and this person was so great, and we're going to be just like them, and we're going to be great too, and we're going to get this disease and disease, and you know so it doesn't make any sense. God's promises, it's very clear that we'll have perfect health, perfect wealth, and perfect happiness. It's guaranteed in the Quran 23 times, and the messenger explains that you're not even get a headache, you'll forget what headaches are. There's no cancer, no disease. So then for people to think, no, you get that in them and try to come up with ways and means to the messenger, of course, in itself is a serious crime too. Those people will definitely get annihilated. I believe, for us to even get more proof. I mean, God is the one who decide everybody's fate, but uh, eventually, these times God has a system in place, so there's no ambiguity about God's system in place. I mean, like for example, any of these communities that got annihilated in the past, we cannot say, well, some of them went to heaven. Of course, people before 40 probably did because they didn't have enough time. But those who were died after 40, they didn't go to heaven. Like people of Pharaoh, where are they? They're in hell. Not like, well, some of them blessing that they got drowned. We can't say that. And nowhere in the Quran it says that. The only place in the Quran that talks about these illnesses and lack of health is during your admission test, which happens at the beginning, you know, and people are talking about what happens in the end, which is the complete opposite. So these people have decided to deviate from the religion, spread confusion and doubt and falsehood, eventually paying for that as well. So, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, that Appendix 9 talks about Abraham, and then one section talks about God never ordered Abraham to sacrifice his son. And I'm just going to read a little bit, just a couple of lines. God is the most merciful. He never violates his own law. 728. Any person who believes that the most merciful ordered Abraham to kill his son cannot possibly make it to God's heaven. Such evil thought about God is grossly blasphemous. So God never goes against his own laws. So if God's promises that for the believer, like who have passed all the tests and have come to certainty, that they eventually will achieve all that peace of mind and happiness in this life first. And that doesn't mean they will have castles or palaces, and that means whatever they have, God has given them. They are happy with that. They have passed all tests, and now they're in perfect peace. Starting here,
Mhm.
perfect peace cannot be attained. I have somebody that I know very close, and they're suffering with cancer at this time, and it's not an easy thing to even for the loved ones to be witness that how much problems and how much pain they're going through. This cannot be, this is not for a good believer to have such a thing. This is not an easy, and why? And somebody's just loosely saying, oh, by the way, cancer is on the rise and chances are each one of us will get it.
No.
Is the God system is based on chances and random, you
Mhm.
know, uh, whatever the random game of chance? That's not how it is.
Yeah.
A God controls a mustard seed, whether it's hidden or obvious, and God controls even the
Mhm.
coronavirus. That
Mhm.
where would he attack, and to the tiniest this or to the subatomic level, and dare we say that it's randomly gonna happen to just people, to whether they're good believers or not, is blasphemous. That means God is not in control.
Yeah, exactly. And then people fail to understand the example with the messenger, versus that, like the messenger was assassinated, right? And he was stabbed, but this is different because if you have an instant death, like in this sense, where so in that case you don't suffer any pain because before you suffer any pain, the angel comes and he takes your life, and we have the example of David Schroeder, the guy whose body was alive physiologically, but soul was taken away, and then he survived for 19 days. But so he was not responsive at all. So, I mean, an example like that, he said, I mean, we're told in the explanations by God's Messenger of the Covenant and the appendices and stuff, is that this is the way Jesus passed away. I mean, the mechanism through which he left this earth, and it's the same for any righteous person or any righteous believer. Meaning, before you suffer any kind of pain or misery, your soul will be taken away. Your body will be might be physiologically alive, but an angel will come. It's almost like somebody hit the pause button. An angel comes, takes away your soul, and then you're gone. I mean, this happened to you, let's say, in an accident. Before, you could get into a really bad accident and die, right? But before the accident happens, some an angel could come, take your soul, and then your empty body without the soul can crash and burn and whatnot, right? But you do not suffer any pain. Now, given that there are no accidents in God's kingdom, right? But that means that, in God's kingdom, you're not going to have an accident and break your leg and be in pain and misery, right? That's different. You're not going to go through these things. You might have done something seriously wrong to deserve that, right? But an accident, for example, that ends up you instantly leaving this world, you falling off a big mountain or a building, whatever, But we're talking about in all these cases, the method of death doesn't matter. It could be anything. But let's say somebody like shoots you or something, right? I mean, the method doesn't matter. But what matters is what you went through, in this time that ended up in your death. Is like you went through all this time of pain, misery, and suffering and illness and bad, just overall, very terrible, horrible experience that you wouldn't wish on anyone, So that's what separates it. The method of death does not matter itself because we all have to die, and it could be through a various number of means. What differentiates these kind of diseases from other ways of dying is that you just have a painful, miserable experience, and this is a sign that these people are being punished for whatever they have done, and they have definitely gained God's wrath by doing something, by falling, where God's protection has been completely removed from them, for Satan to allow to inflict them with such pain and misery. I mean, Satan hates us all, right? So he's been waiting for a chance to inflict us with all kinds of things. And so these people, once God's protection is removed, I mean, Satan afflicts them. They're in Satan's domain, and Satan's not even able to protect them, even if he wanted to keep them happy. So eventually have all of these things, and they die. So to that, for what that person said, that saying, like, for example, the example you gave, that cancer's on the rise and we're all gonna die. Yeah, these are people that are gonna die because they're not in God's kingdom. Because if you're in God's protection, like you can read, for example, Psalms 91 and how precise God's protection is. I mean, He knows each and every person who's a believer, and He'll protect them. Even if there's viruses. Speaking of viruses like we have now, I mean, if you are doing everything right by God, even if you are thrown in the middle of a virus, you know, and you don't deserve to get sick by that virus is not going to touch you. Why? Because if you're righteous and you deserve it, God's protection will be there. God's angels will protect you from the virus. I mean, can God's angels not see the virus and, like, just push it away? Of course they can. They can form. God can form a shield around you, an invisible shield, and none of these things will touch you. This is God's protection. So we have to believe that, and just going by mere chances, like what you said, this person was saying, I mean, this is absolutely wrong. I mean, the Messenger of the Covenant explains, like, he says, even if there's like a nuclear explosion somewhere, you know, if you're a believer, if there are believers among in that nuclear explosion, God will figure out a way. God will make a way for these people to be saved, you know. So this is God we're talking about. I mean, God could transport you in a miraculous way somewhere in another dimension or even something. I mean, God can do anything. So why would it be impossible for God to just protect someone from something like cancer? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, mashallah, that's so true. Actually, they try to say that when you get sick, that I've seen in people like when they get sick in old age or something, that God is purifying you. That's the phrase they use, and uh, many
Mm,
examples of the people get, oh, because I have done wrong, and this is how God is going to purify me. So at least I can suffer the consequences here rather than in the hereafter. This is
right.
very
Yeah.
my
And the
God. If
messenger,
you,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, sure. Yeah, the messenger explains that your heaven and hell starts here. So you can't be in hell in this world, and then all of a sudden you have this magical utopian life starts when you die. If you're gonna experience heaven, you're gonna experience it here and in the hereafter. That's Quran's
Exactly.
system, right? So that's the thing. So God willing, I'm gonna respond to some comments that were also on YouTube. So one of the brothers, he asked, "What about Job?" Right? So we know that, as I explained earlier, but I mean, I probably didn't. But Job and Solomon, for example, represent two ends of the testing spectrum. In the footnote, right? So we can be when we say that we believe, we can be tested through lack or abundance of anything. So that includes your health, wealth, anything. You can be as rich. For example, you can be as rich as Solomon, or you can be as and experience complete luxury and everything, or you can be someone like Job who had so much pain and lost everything, right? But that was all part of his test, his admission test. So once he was past his test, he continued to worship God to this point, which could last maybe a few years for a believer, like 4 or 5 years usually, as the Master of the Covenant explains too. So after that, once you're proven as a worshiper of God, there's no need to put you through this gruesome circumstance. So, and God explains in the Quran that after that, God made it up to him and, gave him twice as much, So God makes it up to the believers once they pass their test. God's tests are, characterized by the fact that they are restorable, right? So, you might go through these problems, but then you could have a complete recovery, and whatever it is, it could even be, something like very bad, but like Job, what Job experienced. But then you could have a complete recovery where you don't lose anything and you get even more. But what we're talking about here is different. We're talking about something that's not recovered, that's not restored, and you lose organs and you lose stuff, and then you just continue to suffer misery and pain until you die. That's very different from the life of a believer. And viruses too. I mean, the Messenger of the Covenant actually also talks about the virus, where he said that he used to swim in this lake in Egypt, which was infected with something and some kind of virus. And every person knew that if you swam in this lake, you're gonna get infected, you're gonna get sick. And he said every year, he would swim in this lake, and the government used to test all these people. They were monitoring these people, so they were testing them, all of them, every year, to see if they have the virus or not. And he would test himself every year, and every year he would come out like he didn't have the virus, and he used to swim there when he was a kid. So this is a good example for us to go off of, especially in the time we have the coronavirus. Of course, I mean, we should try to protect ourselves as much as we can, but we have to remember that God is the one who is the best protector. Ultimately, if we deserve to get sick, we will get sick. Like the doctors and nurses, for example, it's a good example, right? I mean, they have protection and stuff like that, but they're also getting sick. But a lot of people who don't even have protection, they're walking around and they don't get sick because there's no law that says this virus has to infect every person, right? That comes near. I mean, if you come in contact with the thing and the system and it allows penetrate through you, yes, you would, but if you deserve to get sick, yes, you will. But God has also given us an immune system and things like that to be able to fight these things off before they get to that point. Also, but God controls all of that. So yes, yes, it could be a test for someone who becomes a submitter. He could get infected by something like that, but then he can have a complete recovery afterwards. But not in the case of like someone dying of AIDS, for example, right? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, Masha Allah, very good point about Job, how he suffered, and then God blessed this person so much. I know a story of person is telling story that when this person was becoming to submission, gone through such a severe test that this person would not let go worshiping God alone, and things would get so hard that this person say would lay down on the bed and read the verses from the Quran. And one of the that I remember is so this is a story that motivates you. Say that if from Surah 21, and Zechariah implore his God that Bila that do not leave me alone with an like a child. And he will implore God that do not leave me alone because he was going through such a misery in life during the submission test. So and after that, it took us a little bit time. Then this person says that I am so blessed right now that I don't even suffer slight headache or anything. This is a life event from present time that this person said that I forgot how the headache feels. I mean, this kind of story just moves you that though this submission test do exist, and when you are coming towards God, that I'm going to implore you only, that you then God will put you through tests, and that test could be survived. You have to trust in God that no matter what happens, everything is in God's control, and I must put my full trust in God.
Mhm. And then once people pass these tests, they will have no problems. They'll have protection, right? But then also after that, I mean, if you break any of God's commandments, then there are these attention getters. Like you could get a headache, even though you were in God's kingdom. Now you temporarily, stepped out at that point because you did something wrong. So that's God's way of getting your attention that hey, you did something wrong. You need to come back. All right. So in that case, you could get, doesn't necessarily mean that, if you get a headache that, you can say, well, I'm a disbeliever, obviously, right? Because let's say you can pass your test and that after that time, things could happen where, let's say you forgot to give your zakat or something, or you missed a prayer. I mean, you can expect to get a headache, for example, something like a headache or something. So that will be a reminder for you that, you've stepped out, you're doing something, you're not thinking about God all day, something could happen. And so then you have to figure out, well, what am I doing wrong that I need to fix in my life? And that's a good way for us to reflect and purify ourselves, like, here and there, like, we could lose our temper, we might get upset or something, and we can get these consequences, little pinches then, but you'll not get something like this where it would end up in a miserable life till the end of your life.
Yeah. All of God's tests are restorable, right? The permanent damage will not happen during a test which you eventually pass. Um, yeah.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
like the whole till, let's say you passed all the tests, but the purification process is still long. God wants us to earn as much credit as, grow our soul throughout our lives, do charitable works, strive in His cause, and commemorate Him so we can grow our soul. Otherwise, God
Mm.
will just take you away as soon as you have passed all the tests. Now it's time to go. But
Mm.
there is a predetermined lifespan. And during that time, a person can make a minor mistake, right? Uh, so we stepped away from the right path and made a mistake, went against some God's laws. And then we get these pinches, which are like you could, get sick, uh, and then you're better. During that time, you will have enough time to reflect, what did I do wrong? And it's sincere seeker of the truth and who's asking God to guide him, what did I do wrong? God always will give you the sign and guide you, and we will know what we were doing wrong so we can purify ourselves. That's the whole long purification process that we could break that, invisible barrier and step out of it. But then it's not that doors are closed, subhanallah. God says the only, unforgivable sin is the idol worship if maintained till that. So any mistake we make, we repent, we reform. God is the most merciful Lord.
Masha Allah. The closest example I can think of is when you start a job, interview you and ask you weird questions, and once they're satisfied, then when you start your job, you earn like 3 months probation period where they will drill you. They will see that whether you really want the job or not. And if you're serious about the job, you went through those 3 months, then you become their full-time employee. And doesn't mean then after that you can just slack off. No, now you are their permanent employee. Now you have to do what they tell. I mean, obviously, if you still you're going to make mistake, they'll write you up. There'll be consequences. But most likely, when you have already gone through the probation period, now you know the system, and you will try your best to follow the company rule. But obviously, you will make mistakes here and there. And it's so much similar to the God system, where you go through this probation period where you're tested, you drill, but then after that, you're in God's kingdom. Now you have gone through the test and you saw the change in your life before submission. During the test, you feel that what happened, and now after the test, now you have signs from God that I have gone through that test, but you still, you don't want to take it for granted. You're gonna want to implore God for that. Please be that my test and make my test easier. And after that, obviously you'll try not to miss a contact prayer or not tell a lie, not steal money, not be on any bad habit. You want to try your best, but obviously you'll make mistake here and there where God will pinch you with something where you get, like, suppose you wake up with a back neck, you cannot, and you need to ponder, what did I do wrong yesterday? God's kingdom, nothing can go wrong. Everything is so perfect. uh, this is even, like in Quran, when you read like 23 places, God says that absolute happiness. Even if you read the regular translation, which we used to do, and we can clearly see the verses. God says, that in God's kingdom, people are very happy. Like in Urdu, like we'll used to read that, उनको दुनिया में कोई तकलीफ नहीं होगी, वो दुनिया में खुश रहेंगे, like they will have no pain. I would ask the regular community that why do you see that in your own translation it says that people will have nothing to suffer? Not even talk about the last final testament translation, but any translation you pick up, God says in there, it's written very clearly in Arabic and Urdu, in English. And they have literature of hadith that's written about Prophet Muhammad that they used to tie a rock on their abdomen, on their stomach, because they were so hungry, they have nothing to eat. And there's hadith that's written that one Sahabi will go to the other Sahabi They'll say, do you have any food? He said, I haven't eaten for that many days. And then they will go to the third Sahabi. They will say, oh, I haven't eaten for that many days. They'll go to Prophet, and Prophet himself, he hasn't eaten more than anybody else. So would you think the writer of the Quran, who's saying that my people will not suffer this problem in this world, will let his Prophet and messenger will suffer for that many days without food? Would you think in logical mind? I mean, come on. That's my point. Thank you.
I have to go now, inshallah.
Okay, yeah. So if you guys, does anybody else have any more comments or questions? I mean, yeah, we did read a lot of verses though.
Masha Allah, you did, yeah, you read 2 full pages, praise God.
Also.
Mashallah, Salman, just a quick question about the verse 34, I think it's 41, where God talks about Noah. Is this the community when Noah landed on this new land, and so they settle down over there, and when they're coming offsprings, and they start building these ships, learn from their ancestors Noah, and then they're riding the planes. So does it mean that when they were blessed or they were leaving community, but after also over time the innovations creep up and all that stuff start happening and they start being ungrateful? So this is what it is picturing there. Is that what it is?
I didn't understand.
Like God is talking about the people that like it says we created
Their
for them,
ancestors on the bodyguard. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were a believing community, and over time they start becoming disbelieving community and unappreciative. Is that what it means?
Yeah, I mean that happens to every community, right? I mean, but Noah existed a very long time ago.
Right.
So all the people that came after them, they know that now after Noah's time, people knew how to make ships,
Right.
this was the first ship that God gave to them. So they were all, obviously there's more, doesn't mean that the people who, are creating ships have to be from Noah's lineage or anything like that. But like they were obviously all of them, since he was existed such a long time ago, they are our ancestors, right? These people. So in general, yeah, I think that's what it means. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess if we don't have any comments or questions, God willing, we can end here. And thank you all for joining us, and hope you're all having a good Ramadan. God willing, we will have our next study on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, God willing. And we will see you then, God willing. And our next teacher is going to be Nudrat. God willing. Nudrat or Huda. One of them. I think Nudrat already left. Right. Okay. So it's either going to be Huda or Nudrat, God willing. We'll find out, God willing. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. God bless you all. Salãmun Alaykum.